I hope in a virus, and I hope that you're going to be safe. In a way, this is going to be another way of dealing with each other. I mean, this is a lecture given to you, I mean, from very, very far. And I hope that you are going to benefit by this new experience. Anyway, I think I'm going to talk to you about phonetics once again in a very brief way, because we had a lecture concerning this PPT presentation, and it's going to be just the first one. Afterwards, I will be dealing with a whole series of lectures, I mean, introducing the different chapters that we are going to cover during the whole semester. The first lecture, consists, it deals with phonetics, of course. How do we make sounds? And when we talk about sounds, we include in it two major, categories of sounds. We include both consonants and vowels. Of course, we have got different reasons why we are going to deal with sounds, because of some features of language. And this feature of language which allows us the possibility to talk about sounds is discreteness. You remember that we talked about sentences that consist of set of words. For example, the man will rewrite the letter. It's possible to divide this sentence into words: the plus man plus will plus rewrite plus the plus letter. Okay? And of course, words can be divided into smaller units that we call morphemes. For example, re consists of the consonant R and the vowel A. Right consists of the consonant R followed by the diphthong I followed by the consonant T. What we notice here is that the words can also, the morphemes can also be divided further into separate sounds. So which means that the sounds are the smallest units out of which we compose morphemes, and morphemes are higher units out of which we compose words, and words, of course, can be taken, together to form sentences. This is what is being explained clearly by this figure here. So we have got some kind of hierarchical organization between the different units. At the top we have got a sentence composed of word 1, word 2, word 3, word 4, etc., and every word is composed of different morphemes. Notice also that the morpheme itself can be composed of different sounds. Now the problem is that how do we make consonants? We make consonants by narrowing the vocal tract at a particular point. This particular point here means the point of contact between two articulators. And what is meant by articulators? Those speech organs that enable us to produce speech sounds. That point of contact between them is called a place of articulation. Now, what's the mechanism we use to produce sounds? Of course, here we begin by different speech organs that are necessary in the production of different speech sounds. We begin first of all by the lungs. You see them here. And we have got the windpipe. The arrow is pointing out, to the windpipe. And of course, we have got the food channel. This is the food channel. Now, this is another figure showing to us two different passages, the passage for food and the passage for air. And what blocks, the food to enter the passage for air is the epiglottis. You have got everything there. Okay. This is another way of showing this, what we call airstream movement from the lungs upward, through the windpipe, through the mouth, or through the nose. Okay, so here we modify the vocal tract at particular points, to produce speech sounds. Now, question 1, we make consonants by constricting our stomachs. We make consonants with our mouths all alone. We make consonants by certain rays that come from our brains. We make consonants by constricting the vocal tract at particular points. Of course, the right answer in this case is the last one. We make consonants by constricting the vocal tract at particular points. Okay, this is another figure showing to us the whole mechanism, okay, which is involved in the production of speech sounds. Of course, we begin now by talking about the different speech organs, within our mouth. We begin first of all by the lips here. Okay, the lips play a role in the production of speech sounds. We have got also the teeth. By the way, we talk about the lower lip and the upper lip. Same thing for the teeth. We can talk about the lower teeth and the upper teeth. Okay. Now we can also talk about the roof of the mouth, which can be divided into different parts. First of all, we can talk about the alveolar ridge. It's that region just behind our upper teeth. Okay? You have got the arrow there. We can also talk about the palate. The palate is another area or region just behind the alveolar ridge. Okay? It's very hard. We can feel it by means of our tongue there. And also, just behind the hard palate, we can talk about the velum or the soft palate. It's the softest part in the roof of the mouth. Okay, the velum, and attached to the velum, there is a hanging flesh at the back of our mouth that we call the uvula. This is the uvula here. Okay. Now the tongue. The tongue, of course, from a biological point of view, is just one unit, but for the sake of the production and description of speech sounds, it should be, divided into different parts. Okay, and of course we can talk about different parts. The first one is the tip of the tongue, followed by the blade, followed by the front, followed by the back, and then the very back of it, that we call the root of the tongue. These are parts that I dictated to my students, and they took note of them. Okay. Now we can talk about two different passages for the air. The nasal cavity. Look at this arrow here showing us this passage through the nose, the nasal cavity. Okay, so we have got two different cavities here. We have got also the oral cavity. So it's through the mouth, the oral cavity, or the passage of air through the mouth here. Okay. Now, another question, how are consonants made? Consonants are made by narrowing the vocal tract at particular points. Okay, how do we classify consonants? When we talk about this classification of consonants, we are simply trying to describe how sounds in general are being articulated. So we're going to talk about three different criteria by means of which we can classify and by means of which we can describe, consonants. First of all, we can talk about, place of articulation. This is what I have just explained. It means what's the point at which the vocal tract is narrowed. And number two, the criterion number two by means of which we have to describe sounds is manner of articulation. How is the vocal tract narrowed? And of course, number three, voicing. Here we are talking about the vocal cords, whether they are open or closed. According to these three criteria, we can obtain different categories of sounds here. Okay? Now here there is a certain figure showing to us our vocal cords and how they work and how they give shape to different speech sounds that we produce. Look, the vocal cords, open and close. Okay, this is another way, a clear picture of our vocal cords while, working there, okay? So how do we classify consonants? Place of articulation, remember place P, number 2 manner, and 3 voicing. So just remember P and V. This is a very short way to remember these 3 criteria, P and V, place, M manner, V voice. So we can talk now about different classes of sounds according to how they are being produced or articulated, taking into account the 3 criteria just mentioned, place, manner, and voice. So first of all, let's begin by different places of articulation. We can talk about the first one, bilabial consonants. They are formed by the narrowing of the vocal tract by the lips. For example, P in pat, B in bat, M in mat, they are bilabial because the 3 consonants are being made or produced or articulated by if you like let's say closing our 2 lips, the lower lip and the upper lip. Okay, this is what is meant by bilabial. The 2 lips are involved in the production of the bilabial sound, bilabial. Now, we have got labiodental sounds or labiodental consonants. They are formed by the narrowing of the vocal tract by a combination of lips and teeth. Okay, and teeth, not the lips. Just omit this, the last word here. So we have got the lower lip and the upper teeth. This is the case, which is shown through the production of f in fail, v in veil. Okay, this is it here. Okay. Now, another place of articulation, alveolar consonants are formed by the narrowing of the vocal tract at the alveolar ridge. T in tap, s in sap, n in nap. So it's the blade of the tongue which is raised towards the alveolar ridge. Just remember the different parts I introduced to you in our lecture in order to remember the different parts of the tongue here. So we have got, once again, I'm going just to mention them very briefly. So we have got the tip of the tongue. Just behind it we have got the blade. Just behind the blade we have got the front. And just behind the front we have got the back and the root of it. Now, t, s, and n in tap, sap, and nap, these are called alveolar consonants because we raise the blade of the tongue towards our alveolar ridge. That's why these sounds t, s, n are called alveolar sound or alveolar consonants. Okay, this is what happens in here. Now, another category of sounds that we call interdental consonants, such as th and th. These 2 sounds are produced by putting our tip of the tongue between our teeth, both the lower and the upper teeth here. Okay. Alveolo-palatal consonants, or in some books, they are called palato-alveolar consonants. These are formed by narrowing of the vocal tract between the alveolar ridge and the hard palate here. But we raise the blade and part of the front of the tongue there. Okay, so these are the cases of sounds in ship, sh in ship, and ch in chip, and j in jip. Now we can talk about velar consonants. These are formed by the narrowing of the vocal tract at the velum. By the way, the velum, you know that it's called a soft palate. So words, that contain these sounds like cap and k there is a velar consonant. Gap and the G in gap is a velar consonant, and sin is a velar nasal. K, G, N are velar sounds because we raise the back of tongue towards the soft palate or the velum. Okay. And we talk about uvular consonants. Uvular consonants, do not exist in English, but they do exist in other languages, like Arabic. So, q in qird, q, this is formed by the narrowing of the vocal tract at the uvula. And so, words which are produced at that particular point are called uvular consonants. Okay, uvular consonants. Now, question number 2. Classify the following sounds on the basis of their place of articulation. So we have got B, P, and M. Are they bilabial, alveolar, alveopalatal, velar, or uvular? We notice that all of them are being produced by involving the two lips. So they are bilabial. Okay. K, G. Are they bilabial, alveolar, alveopalatal, velar, or uvular? We have got sh and j. Are they bilabial, alveolar, alveopalatal, velar, or uvular? Same thing for q. Is it bilabial, alveolar, alveopalatal, velar, or uvular? Just remember what we have said concerning the description of different sounds, and we will automatically find the right answer. Okay, now we can talk about the other criterion that we introduced, number 2, which is manner of articulation. Now let's talk about different manners. The first one is what we call a stop sound, or stops in the plural. Stops are formed by a complete obstruction of air. The air is being stopped, obstructed completely by the speech organs. This is the case of P and T in pat, K and P in cap, D and G in dog, B and D in blood. In all the underlined consonants, we need to stop the air momentarily. Okay. Another manner of articulation is affricate. What is an affricate sound? Is a stop followed by a fricative sound. And they have got more or less the same place of articulation. Okay, so we have got chip and gym. Ch in chip, j in gym. Okay, nasals. Nasals are made by lowering the velum and complete closure of the vocal tract. Man, m and n in man, and n in sing, sing. So these are nasals. This is another manner of articulation. Now let's talk about lowering and raising the velum together with the uvula, of course, that follows it. Okay. So here, it can be raised or lowered. When it is raised, the only passage which is left free for the air is the mouth, the oral cavity. But when it is lowered, the air can escape through both cavities, the oral cavity and the nasal cavity. Okay? Liquids. Liquids are formed by an obstruction that does not completely close the vocal tract or create friction. This is the case of r in reed and l in lead. Okay? Glides. Glides are formed by a very slight closure of the vocal tract. For example, y and w in the word yellow, and whisper, wash. So y and w are called glides because they are formed by a very slight closure of the vocal tract. Now let's talk about voicing. This is the third criterion by means of which we can describe sounds. Remember that we talked about place, manner. Now voicing. Voicing, this is the job of the vocal cords. So, voiced sounds are characterized by the closure of the vocal tract. It's not, closure, but there is a rapid movement of closing and opening by the vocal cords. This is what gives us a vibration. Okay? It's not the closure that you have got here, by a rapid closing and opening of the vocal cords. And this is what gives us, number one, sound. So just correct this. Voice sounds are characterized by a rapid closing and opening of the vocal tract. Of course, this is done by involving our vocal cords. Now, voiceless sounds are made without closing the vocal tract. The passage between the vocal cords is left open, so the air is left free through them. And in this way, we obtain voiceless consonants. So, voiced consonants are obtained when we have got vibration. Vibration obtains when we have got this rapid closing and opening by the vocal cords. Now, voiceless sounds are being obtained when the two vocal cords do not work, they are at rest, there is a wide opening left between them, okay? And this is what happens there, okay? Look. Okay, when we have got this rapid closing and opening, this is what gives us vibration. But when we have got just opening, a wide opening left between the two vocal cords, here we obtain voiceless sounds. So here we have got a case of our vocal cords, vibrating here, okay? That's all as far as this first lecture is concerned. I would like to move on to the next lecture. Okay, I hope that you have, tried, to get the main points of it, and to remember what we talked about, before. Hi everybody, we are still dealing with phonology, and we are going to see further notions, in phonology. Of course, in phonology, as one branch of linguistics, we try, to describe what exists in the mind of the native speaker as linguistic knowledge. And as far as phonology is concerned, we try to see what happens or what is stored as pieces of information about the sounds of one's language. So what do you have in your head? You have got the sounds or the phonemes, and of course you have got also the rules. For example, we have got a phoneme that we pronounce as t. This t can be pronounced both as a d or t, depending on the phonetic environment where t is found. Okay? Now, of course, we can talk about the rule as being a specific rule, which means that it does not apply to all instances of t between vowels. It isn't a part of the grammar of other dialects of English. It's only one way to make sequences of vowels and voiceless consonants easier to say. Now, the rules that we discover are often natural, in that one can find an explanation for many of them in terms of ease of articulation, but they are not inevitable or innate. They are specific rules of particular dialects or languages and had to be learned. Now, a way to think about phonemes, you have a mental dictionary where you store the words you have learned. What information does it have to contain for each word? At least the meaning of the word, the sound of the word. Now, how much detail do you have to remember about the sound of each word? Now, of course, it's something which is very difficult. It's tough to remember. For example, do you need to remember that sitting begins with s or sh? Is the next vowel e or e? Is the next sound t or d? Does baiting begin with p or b? Is the next vowel A or O is the next sound T or D. Now, if you can't predict something by a rule, you don't have to remember it. Just remember the rule, the things that can't be predicted. So it's the existence of rules in the mind of the native speaker that facilitates everything for him. Okay. Now, of course, you remember the example of the diphthong. We have got I in our mind, and through the rules, it can be pronounced as I or I, depending on the phonetic environment, depending on the rules that are stored in our mind. Now, languages can differ in what is predictable. Let's talk about Korean. I mean the sound L and R in Korean. We have got words like rupee, keri, saram, okay, and the others here. Look at the phonetic environment of L and the phonetic environment of R here. Okay. Now we notice that R is always in front of a vowel here. Okay, but L is never in front of a vowel. What does this mean? The place where we find R, we don't find L. So here we can say that they are in complementary distribution. Okay, so what is supposed to exist as a piece of information in the mind of Koreans? So here we have got only one sound, which is L. Koreans don't have to remember if a word has L or R. But that phoneme has two allophones here. And these allophones are obtained according to the rules here. L can be realized, can be pronounced as R or as L in different phonetic environments. So in Korean, L and R are the same here. They belong to the same phoneme, this one. But of course, there are two realizations of the same phoneme. These realizations are determined by different rules. So Korean works like this. We have got the sound or the phoneme in our mind, which is L. Here, this L is pronounced as R or L. Okay. These are what R and L are called allophones or realizations of the phoneme L. Okay. So while in English works like this, L, is a separate sound, is a separate phoneme. It's different from R in English. So these are two different phonemes, and they have got two different realizations here. Okay. So look, in English we have got L as a phoneme. It is realized as L. This is one of the realizations of it. R is another phoneme, and this is its realization. Now in Korean we have got only one sound, one phoneme, and it is realized as L or R here. So in fact here, how can we tell, or how can you tell how any particular language works? So we can talk about the writing system. It may give a clue. Alphabets and similar writing systems tend to distinguish phonemes but not allophones. And in fact, Korean has only one symbol for both, L and R, while English, of course, has two, one for each. But be careful, this is not reliable. Writing is not a reliable criterion in this case. What if there is no writing system? How can we make the difference between S1 and S2? Okay, how can we say that S1 and S2 sound 1 and sound 2 correspond to two phonemes or just one? Here we have got, the answer, okay, or the solution comes from the notion of the minimal pair. What is a minimal pair? Two words with different meanings, identical in every way except that one has S1, sound 1, where the other has sound 2. For example, we have got lead, read, lead, read. What's the difference between these two words? We have got here in the first, in the initial position we have got L, and here in the initial position we have got R. So we have got everything identical except one, L, R, in the same position here. So both words, lead and read, form a minimal pair. And the contrast between them I mean, is due to the fact that here we have got L and here we have got R. Same thing for kale, care, load, road. Okay, so a minimal pair is the case where we have got two words having exactly the same sounds except one in the same position. Okay. And these are not, I mean, if you like, minimal pairs. Call, car, because we have got a difference not in terms of just one sound, but at least two. So we have got the vowel, which is different from here, and we have got the L, which is different from here. So this is not a minimal pair. Same thing in here. Okay, same thing in here. These are not minimal pairs. Now, the result. If you can find a minimal pair with sound 1 in the first word and sound 2 in the second, sound 1 and sound 2 correspond to distinct phonemes. So in English, L and R correspond to two distinct phonemes, L and R. L and R contrast, they contrast. This is the function of sounds in languages. Sounds or phonemes do make the difference between words. They contrast words. Okay. Now, if there are no minimal pairs, probably sound 1 and sound 2 are allophones of a single phoneme. This is the case of R and L in Korean. Two sounds that correspond to a single sword sound. Now, we would like to know what determines when you get sound 1 and when you get sound 2. How? This is the answer that we are going to get, in the next lecture. Okay, this is another lecture, on further, issues in phonology. So, how can we work out what speakers and listeners of the language know? We are still, answering the question here, how to make the difference between phonemes and allophones. Of course, here we have got to answer 3 more questions. What sounds contrast in the language? That is to say, what are the phonemes? And what sounds count as the same? That is to say, which sounds are allophones of a single phoneme? By allophones, we mean realizations or pronunciations of the phoneme. When a phoneme has 2 or more allophones, what rule does the speaker have for which one occurs where? The first step. Is there contrast? How do you tell if two sounds S1 and S2 correspond to two phonemes or just one? Here, if you still remember, we talked about the solution of the minimal pair. Can we find a minimal pair? Which means two words with different meanings, identical in every way, except that one has S1 where the other has S2. Now, let's talk about, these two words, lead and read, kale and care. Okay. Of course, we said that, the two sounds, make the contrast between the words. Of course, if we can find a minimal pair with sound 1 in the first word and sound 2 in the second, sound 1 and sound 2 correspond to distinct phonemes. So in English, L and R correspond to two distinct phonemes, L and R, okay, because they contrast. Now, the second step, what if there are no minimal pairs? If there are no minimal pairs, probably sound 1 and sound 2 are allophones of a single phoneme. Two sounds that correspond to a single mental sound. Now, we would like to know what determines when you get sound 1 and sound 2. That is, what's the rule which is involved in this case and how? So let's, once again, think about the example that we saw before. The pronunciation of the diphthong in English, I. In some words, it is pronounced as I. In some others, it is I. Now, you remember we made a difference between the two pronunciations according to the phonetic environment where this diphthong is found. Okay, what influences the sounds? Sounds are influenced by their environment. So look at what sounds are around the ones you are interested in. Environment, it means the surrounding sounds. look here, I mean, we need just to go to, directly to the result, because we already considered this example of I. So in cases where the I is pronounced, we have got the following sound, is voiceless. But when it is just I mean, we find that the sounds, after it, are all of them voiced. So these are, here, okay? This is where we find I, okay? And this is where we find I, when it is followed by voiceless sounds. So we can say that we can make a generalization in this case. When this I is followed by voiceless sounds, it is pronounced as I. But when it is followed by voiced sounds, it is just I here. Okay, look, this is the rule. Okay, this diphthong is being realized, pronounced as I in the environment where this is the place where it is found, where it is followed by voiceless sounds. In this case, we can talk about complementary distribution. When two sounds S1 and S2 never occur in the same environment, we say they are in complementary distribution. If two sounds are in complementary distribution and they are similar, we can conclude that they are allophones of a single phoneme. And this is the case of I and I. One is always followed by voiced sounds, and the other one is always followed by voiceless sounds. So the place where we can find S1, we cannot find S2. They never occur in the same environment, so they are in complementary distribution. This is just a way, to show, complementary distribution. Clark Kent and Superman, they can never be in the same place here. Okay, what do we conclude from here? In general, this is the procedure that we have to follow. Number one, we have to look for minimal pairs. If we find some, it's done. We have got the answer. You have two different phonemes. Not found, if you don't have any minimal pair, then we can ask this question: are the sounds in complementary distribution? Are the sounds similar? Look at the environment of the sounds. What determines the outcome? Okay. Now let's talk about vowel length in Japanese. Here we have got examples from Japanese, and we are going to talk about these two sounds, this short one and this long one. This is the long one in here, and here we have got the short ones in here. Okay. Now, there is a minimal pair, actually more than one minimal pair for O and O. If we go back here, let's talk about examples of words. We can say that in fact the two sounds are found in in what we call minimal pairs. So in fact O and O contrast in Japanese. So they are not allophones of a single phoneme, but correspond to two different phonemes. Okay. Now, this is the rule that we have got in our mind. Here we have got two different phonemes in our mind, and these two different phonemes are being pronounced differently, okay, according to the rules we store in our mind here. This one is the realization corresponding to this phoneme, and this one is the realization corresponding to this phoneme here. Okay. Now, what about English? Here we have got a set of words here, and we have got another set of words. Okay, so we have got beat, bead, seat, seed, leak, league. What do we notice here as the last sound here? We have got t, s, f, p. All these are voiceless, and here we have got d, d, g, and z, z, v, v, b. All these are voiced. Now, here, this one is shorter as compared to this one. This one is longer. What makes this one longer and this one shorter? It's the following sound in here. Here, the following sound is voiceless. T, k, s, f, p. Here, the following sound is voiced. T, t, z, k, d, g, z, and v, okay, and b. So, do they contrast? Can you find a minimal pair? Of course. I mean, okay. I mean, we don't have minimal pair because we have got E and E, and we have got T and D. So more than one sound that, I mean, that are different. Okay. So sit, seed. So two different, I mean, sounds in these two words here. So it's not a minimal pair. Okay. Are E and E in complementary distribution? Of course, they are in complementary distribution because the context where we find one, we don't find the other. This one is always followed by voiceless sound. This one is always followed by voiced one. Same thing across all these words here. Okay. Now, where does E appear? Where does E appear? Same thing. Now, the environment, the short vowel E only occurs before voiceless consonants. The long vowel E only occurs before voiced consonants. So, these two sounds do not contrast. They are allophones of a single phoneme. This is what exists in the mind of the native speaker. We have got one phoneme, and this one phoneme, through the rules that are stored in the mind of the native speaker, it can be pronounced as E or E. Okay. This is another way of showing this rule. We have got A is being realized as B in the context where it is placed between C and D here. A certain phoneme is realized as a certain allophone in a certain environment. Okay. So once again, go back here. This is A. This is the sound we are interested in. It becomes or realized is pronounced as B. In this context, when it is placed between C and D. This is the rule here. Okay. So in our English case, this vowel is being realized as long, in which context, when it is, this is its place, when it is followed by voiced sounds here. Okay. Okay, hi everybody. Once again, we are still dealing with the same questions in phonology, and we are trying to answer them. Okay. The first question: how do you find out what the underlying form, the phoneme, is? Are some rules more natural, more likely common than others? How generally does a rule apply? Now, finding out the underlying form, the hypothesis, we have got to work by means of a hypothesis in this case. The rules tend to be simple and natural. So we have got simplicity and naturalness as criteria to judge rules. So we have to pick the underlying form so that the rules will be simple and natural. What's a simple rule and what's a natural rule? Example from southern Congo. Okay. We are going to, consider two different sounds, the non-palatal Z and the palatal J. And especially in words, we have got these ones here, where we have got Z, and we have got these words where we have got J. Okay. Now, we are going to talk about their distribution, that is, the position or the positions where they are going to be found in these words. Now, of course, we have to organize the data to look at the distribution of both sounds. So we can say Z occurs here, 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 and here. J occurs here, here, and here. In this way, this is going to help us understand their phonetic environment It's going to enable us formulate a phonological rule to show where this sound occurs and where this sound occurs. Okay. So, in fact, we can say that the non-palatal z occurs before this sound and this sound and this sound. Look in here, this one, and this one, also this one. These are the sounds that occur, if you like, after z. So we can say, in fact, we can talk about two different rules. We can say this sound becomes z when it is followed by this one, this one, this one. Or we can have another rule. This sound z becomes j in the context where it is followed by just e. Let's go back to our data to find this here. Look, z is followed by this sound, followed by this sound, followed by this sound. These three sounds. Okay. But this one is always followed by just this one, e here. So which rule are we going to consider? Can we say that z becomes j in this context where it is followed by e? Or can we say that j becomes z when it is followed by this one, and by this sound here? These are the rules. J can become z in the context where it is followed by this one and this one here. Or we can say z becomes j when it is followed by just e. So, in fact, this is the underlying form or the phoneme here. Okay. What about naturalness? We know that certain processes are more natural, common than others. If the rule that you hypothesize involves a natural common process that makes it at least plausible, that it means that you are on the right track. Now let's talk about some common processes. For example, assimilation. This is common process number one, which is assimilation. Let's talk about the flapped t in American English. It can be pronounced as the between two voiced sounds or vowels. The voiceless sound t becomes the voiced sound d. Earlier, we considered the example where t can be pronounced as d. Here, it can be, we can talk about like on. This is due to the influence of the following sound n. Bin, pine, hand. Okay? Now, here it's when we okay. Now we can talk about progressive assimilation as in cases of devoicing of liquids in English here. When we have got especially L immediately following a voiceless stop like P, this L is not totally voiced, but we can say it is devoiced, just because of the influence of the voiceless sound which is placed before it. So same thing in play, same thing in pray. R, we know, is a voiced sound, but when it is preceded by P here, it becomes devoiced. Same thing for R in tray, R in cray, and in, for example, ru, the R here is completely voiced, but in pru, in fact, here it's devoiced. True, crew, all these sounds, here, are preceded by voiceless stops, p, t, k. So these sounds are likely to have some kind of influence on the pronunciation of R. They make of it a devoiced one. Okay, so this is the case here. Okay, this is the rule. Okay. This is the voiceless sound, which affects the L following it. It makes of it devoiced. Now, we can talk about dissimilation, the opposite of assimilation. Pronunciation of a diphthong as diphthong. Okay? So we are trying to make the two sounds. F is fricative and th is fricative. So we try to make f, which is fricative, more, different, more unlike. It's different from the fricative following it. We make of f a stop. So instead of saying diff, we say dip, to make them different. Okay? Let's consider the change in pilgrim, peregrino. So instead of L, we have got R. It used to be peregrino. It becomes Spanish pellegrino here. Okay. Now, common processes still, we are dealing with another one that we call deletion here. Of course, the deletion is the noun which is derived from the verb to delete, to omit. Okay. So, t after n, for example, panty. The way it is written, it's panty. But normally, the way native speakers pronounce it, not panty, but they pronounce it as panny, panny. So 20, as it is written, normally it's pronounced in a rapid colloquial speech. It's not 20, but it's 20. Okay, so we can also talk about the deletion of the schwa before stress syllable. So normally it is supposed to be police, but normally here it is normally pronounced as police. So the vowel is omitted. So suppose, sometimes it becomes just suppose. And same thing for carouse, it's just carouse here. So normally deletion, it means simply that the omission of a certain segment in a certain phonetic environment. Now we can talk about epenthesis, for example, t between n and s. Instead of saying, sense, we try to add some kind of t between n and sense. Prince, normally, there is some kind of tendency to insert this between n and s. P can be also inserted between m and s. For example, in Thompson, we tend to insert the p between m and s. Thompson here. So this is just a case of epenthesis. It's a special case of a common process. We can also talk about metathesis, which is the change of the order of two segments in the same word. It can be similar to what we call a slip of the tongue. Instead of saying ask, some people may mispronounce the word and say axe here. So, in general, rules should be simple, natural. And there is one more consideration. Rules should capture generalizations. A rule to be considered a real rule, it should be general. How generally does a rule apply? A possible rule to account for hone, bone, stone. This O becomes own. It becomes nasalized after N. But what about hand, pin, ham? Which means that we can have another general rule which is not just about the vowel O, it can be about all vowels. It should generalize, across all vowels here. So V becomes nasalized, any vowel can become nasalized in the context where it is followed by a nasal sound. This is the place for the nasal sound, and this is the segment that follows it. It is a nasal sound. Okay, so this one is more general than this one in here. This one is specific because it concerns only one vowel, but here it concerns all vowels that become nasalized in the context where they are followed by nasal sound here. Okay. You want to hypothesize a rule as general as your data will permit. Further data may lead you to narrow your rule, but this is the way to start. Okay, so we can talk about natural classes. The idea of natural classes, it means that normally we tend to group sounds into groups because those sounds share some common phonetic features. And the fact that they share phonetic features, they allow us to include them under the same phonological rules. And that's why we say rules don't apply in the neighborhood of random collections of sounds. Rules don't affect random collections of sounds. Same thing here. Okay? That's all. I think we need to see another, chapter in linguistics. Now we have done with phonology as a chapter. I need my students to go back to the book. I asked them to read and to go to the section of exercises there and to consider them and try to answer all the exercises. If we have got an opportunity, we are going to correct all the exercises together. Same thing applies to the first chapter, which is phonetics. I would like you, all of you, of course, to go and have a look at the exercises in the end of the chapter called phonetics. And I would like you to try to work your mind a little bit and to try to answer all those questions. And we will try, I hope this period is going to be a very short one. This crisis is going to be of short existence in our life. So we're going to have the opportunity to work on the exercises together. So these are two chapters that we have finished right now. And we're going to begin another chapter, which is morphology, later on, inshallah. Okay, good luck.